7 years ago, I took in a lost soul nobody else wanted. I tried for so long, but I could never seem to break through her walls. Then her first love showed up. It turned out she did have a gentle side. It just wasn't reserved for me. On our wedding day, she threw the ring down in front of me. "You're the one who's delusional. I only have Preston in my heart. I'm calling this wedding off." The day I finally let her go, I told a lie, promising I'd be right back. And then I never returned. When I opened my eyes again, we met on a film set. She, now an Oscar-winning actress, grabbed me. "Be right back," she hissed. "Where the hell did you go?" Diana Sullivan emerged from the award ceremony, the entrance already swarmed by a massive crowd of fans and entertainment reporters. "Miss Sullivan, the scumbag you mentioned in your acceptance speech, is he in the industry?" The girl who once huddled with me in a tiny apartment, whose face would flush with excitement over a good bowl of spicy noodles, was now flanked by assistants and bodyguards, her smile poised and graceful. My soul hovered in the air, watching her in silence. 7 years apart had changed her so much. I almost didn't recognize this brilliant, stunning woman as the reserved girl I once knew. My trance was broken when the door of a waiting Maybach opened. A man radiating wealth and privilege, jacket in hand, walked to Diana's side and gently draped it over her bare shoulders. "If Miss Sullivan's ex-boyfriend is in the entertainment world," he said smoothly, "then he can consider his career over." His arrival sent waves of shrieks and gasps through the fans and reporters. "It's Preston Vance, the heir to the Vance fortune. Oh my God, the rumors that he was pursuing our Diana are true. My ship has sailed. Mr. Vance, do you know the actress's ex-boyfriend? Is it true that he was a total suck-up who dumped her for a rich heiress, wasting a decade of her life?" He offered a cryptic smile. "Frankly, I should thank that foolish ex-boyfriend. He allowed a diamond as brilliant as Diana to return to her rightful place. As for the other details, I don't think we need to dig any deeper. Let's all focus more on my fiancé's incredible work." That single word sent the crowd into a frenzy. "Fiancé? Is Diana Sullivan marrying Preston Vance? How long have you two been together? Mr. Vance, did you steal her away from that scumbag?" Preston gestured for his bodyguards to push back the surging reporters, then guided Diana into the back of the Maybach. Watching them lean on each other so intimately, a long-forgotten, piercing pain crept through my entire being. "Diana, you're about to marry another man. Can you still not let go of your hatred for me? If that's the case, in the 7 years since we broke up, why did you never once try to find out the truth of what really happened?" "Diana, don't go. Frank, he can't lose you." As the Maybach sped away, a figure in tattered clothes darted out from behind me. I snapped back to reality. It was my mother, chasing after the car. For the past 7 years, my soul has wandered with my mother, who had lost her mind. Today, we drifted to this awards ceremony by chance, leading to this reunion with Diana. I watched as someone tripped my mother during her chase, and I instinctively reached out to catch her. But her dirt-caked body passed right through my transparent arm, and she hit the ground with a heavy thud. In that instant, my guilt crested into an unbearable wave. This was a woman who had once faced hardship with incredible strength. Before their divorce, my father had beaten her so badly she was left with a permanent urostomy bag, yet she never shed a tear. After he left, she gritted her teeth, working 4 jobs a day to put me through college. But when she heard the news of my death, the shock was too much, and her mind broke. Mom's screaming drew the attention of the fans and reporters. The fans recoiled, covering their noses in disgust. "Where's security? This beggar stinks. Get her out of here. She's getting the red carpet filthy. How are the other stars supposed to get their pictures taken? Wait, did she just call her Diana? Who does she think she is, calling our goddess by her first name?" My heart twisted as I watched them mock my mother. I desperately wanted to help her up and get her away from this place, but I was just a soul now. I couldn't do anything but watch. The more astute reporters, however, sensed a story in my mother's frantic words. Dozens of cameras swarmed her, as she was instantly engulfed in a sea of flashing lights. "Ma'am, is Frank your son? Is he the ex-boyfriend Diana Sullivan was talking about? Where's your son now? Did he marry some heiress and kick you out onto the streets? If you have anything to say to your scumbag son, feel free to say it to our cameras. We're broadcasting live. The whole country is watching and will support you." Facing the reporters' accusatory, relentless questions, my mother's fragile mental state shattered completely. She began flailing her arms wildly at the crowd. "Don't you dare say bad things about Frank. Frank is the kindest boy. He was tricked. Damn it all. Mr. Vance told him to." Before she could finish, someone called for a doctor, who quickly administered a sedative. Yes, I had known that golden boy of Manhattan's elite, Preston Vance, for a decade. The Vance and Sullivan families were old friends, and Preston and Diana had grown up together, childhood sweethearts. In the eyes of their parents, they were a match made in heaven, destined to be married. And I was the accident. My life and Diana's first crossed paths at the freshman welcome gala in college. As an experienced upperclassman host, I was paired with a completely inexperienced Diana on stage. The spotlight hit her, and she was radiant, like an angel who had fallen to earth. The way she looked at me was like a river of stars, full of warmth and light. But the moment our eyes met, I pulled back. After the gala, she tried to get close to me many times, but I always pushed her away with a cold shoulder. That Christmas, Diana stood in front of my dorm, her face flushed, holding a homemade cake and a small bouquet of roses. "Frank," she whispered, "I want to ask you one last time, face to face. Can I be your girlfriend?" My heart was breaking, but in front of her, I threw everything into the trash. She bit her lip as tears streamed down her face, melting the snowflakes on her cheeks. The smash cake looked just like my own smashed, impoverished life. I had nothing to offer the girl I loved, no way to promise her happiness. All I could do was crush her hope before it could grow. After that day, I found an internship and moved off campus, cutting all ties with Diana. Just when I thought she had finally given up, Preston Vance found me. It was from him that I learned about Diana's incredibly wealthy family, and that the Sullivans and the Vances were at war because she had called off the engagement. Preston looked at me like I was a stray dog. "You think you can be with Diana just because you have a pretty face that fools college girls? A piece of trash like you isn't even fit to shine her shoes." He sneered. "If you're that desperate to be a kept man, I can set you up at some exclusive clubs in the city. The rich old women there could easily support you for the rest of your life." His humiliating words made my fists clench. I was about to swing, but a sharp slap landed on Preston's face before I could move. "Apologize." Diana, who had rushed over, had struck him with all her might, knocking his arrogant face to the side. He froze, stunned, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Diana stood in front of me, her slender frame trembling with rage. "Preston, you're the one who's delusional. I only love Frank. I am calling this wedding off, and that's final." Those memories feel like they belong to another life. In the present, my mother, who had been lying quietly in her hospital bed, suddenly opened her eyes and began to mechanically get up and walk out. My thoughts snapped back to reality, and I floated closely behind her, terrified she would come to more harm. It was as if she had regained her senses. She navigated the streets with a strange familiarity, walking for over 2 hours until she arrived at the gates of the Sullivan estate. She rang the bell, and then, with a soft thud, she fell to her knees. I was frantic. I had no idea what she was doing. A maid from the Sullivan household came out, glanced at her, and went back inside without a word. I had no other option but to follow the maid's path, passing through the gates and floating deeper into the estate. The Sullivan grounds were vast and sprawling. I drifted for a long time before I finally found Diana's room. She was in a silk robe, sitting at her vanity and staring at her phone, her eyes unfocused. I drew closer and saw what she was watching, a looping video of the reporters harassing my mother the day before. A complex emotion flickered in her eyes as she murmured to herself, "It's impossible. Frank would never let his mother live on the streets. He cared about her more than anyone. He broke up with me because of what she said." Hearing this, I began to tremble with a desperate excitement. That reason for our breakup was a lie, a complete fabrication. It was all to save Diana's life. Forgetting I was only a spirit, I tried to scream the explanation into her ear, praying she could somehow hear me and let go of her hatred. And then the architect of that lie, Preston Vance, pushed the door open and walked in. He saw the video, paused for a second, and then snatched the phone from her hand. "Diana, you know you have a heart condition. You can't watch things that will upset you. Please, don't make me worry like this." Diana was lost in her thoughts, completely ignoring him. A flicker of annoyance crossed Preston's face, but he kept his voice smooth. "Darling, our wedding is in 2 days. It's not really fair to me that you're still thinking about your ex, is it?" He purred. "Perhaps I can help you think about something else." That bastard actually reached around from behind her and untied the belt of her robe. My spirit raged. I swung at his head with all my might, but my fists passed right through him like air. All I could do was watch in helpless fury as the silk tie fluttered to the floor. The rage made me dizzy, and my spiritual form grew faint. In the haze, my most important memories began to play back like an old home movie. It was New Year's Eve, and there was a sudden knock on the door of my small apartment. Diana stood there with a small suitcase, a brilliant smile on her face. "Frank, I'm even poorer than you are now. Can you take me in?" It was only then that I learned what had happened. After she'd called off the engagement to Preston, the Sullivan family had given her an ultimatum. Either she went back to Preston and restored the engagement, or the Sullivans would disown her, cutting her off from the family completely. Without a moment's hesitation, Diana chose the latter. On New Year's Eve, she packed a few clothes and walked out of her family's mansion without a single look back. I was stunned into silence, unable to process it. Who could believe that this quiet, slender, seemingly fragile girl would actually defy her entire world for someone like me, a person with absolutely nothing to his name? My mother quickly pushed me aside and pulled Diana, who was shivering in her thin clothes with a face red from the cold, into our tiny apartment. I think, in that moment, she understood how I felt about her. My mom sat Diana down at our small table and quickly filled a bowl with dumplings for her. "My dear, you are such a brave girl, much braver than my Frank will ever be. You stay here with us. Even if I have to take on 2 more jobs, I promise you'll have a warm place to sleep and food to eat." Diana blushed and nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller." And so, Diana spent the rest of the holiday break living with us. After the new year, my mom returned to her live-in nanny job, and I went back to my internship. Every morning, Diana would wake up early to make me breakfast before tidying up the apartment. Our cramped, cold apartment began to feel warm and inviting, more and more like a real home under her care. Sometimes I'd bring home cheap street food for her after work. Watching her wrinkle her nose in delight as she ate, I'd have this fleeting, beautiful illusion that she was really my girlfriend, and that this simple, happy life was something we could have forever. Another Christmas came. That night, I was forced to pull an all-nighter at work for an urgent project and didn't have a chance to tell Diana. The next morning, I dragged my exhausted body home to find she had rushed back from her dorm and fallen asleep at her little table. The table was covered with dishes, all cold now. In the center sat a homemade cake that caught my eye immediately. I recognized it in an instant. It was identical to the one I had thrown in the trash when I rejected her all that time ago. "Frank, you're back." Diana woke up and saw me staring at the cake. Her eyes immediately welled up with panic. "The cake last night I thought maybe I could try again." "Frank, I'm so sorry. I'll throw it out right now." She scrambled to grab the cake, but I caught her hand and pulled her in my arms instead. The window was open, and a heavy snow had begun to fall outside, flakes drifting in on the cold wind. There, in the first snow of winter, I finally kissed the girl I had loved for so long. If only time could have stopped in that moment. If none of what came after had ever happened, maybe this tragedy could have been avoided. But there are no if-onlys in a story already written by fate. Not long after we officially got together, I was at work when I got a sudden call from Diana's college roommate, Katie. She told me Diana had suffered a sudden, acute heart attack in their dorm room and had been rushed to the hospital. I took off from work immediately and raced to the hospital, but by the time I got there, Diana was already in a coma, barely clinging to life. The doctor on duty told me there were no treatment options for her condition in the country. The only way to save her was to send her abroad immediately for palliative care to buy some time until a suitable heart donor could be found for a transplant. But whether they could find a match in time, or if her body would reject the new organ, it was all up to chance. But the cost of such a procedure abroad, from the pre-op matching to the surgery and post-op care, was astronomical. It would be millions with no ceiling. The news hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't even process it. My mother was so frightened her legs gave out from under her. We both knew Diana's life was slipping away with every passing second. Our only choice was to pull ourselves together and scramble to raise the money. We borrowed from everyone we could. My mother even got on her knees and begged her employer for a 5-year advance on her salary. But even with our best efforts, we only managed to raise a little over $100,000. Compared to the doctor's estimate, it was a drop in the ocean, not nearly enough to give us any hope of saving her. The thought of losing Diana forever made my world feel like it was collapsing. I couldn't sleep for nights on end. Whenever I closed my eyes, I'd dream of Diana's cold body being pushed into an incinerator. I'd be outside, screaming, watching helplessly as the girl I loved was consumed by the flames. The weight of it all crushed me. In just a few days, I was a wreck, a walking corpse. I followed her doctor around constantly, begging him to find another way, any way, to save my Diana. It was then that Preston Vance appeared at the hospital, holding a file with information on a suitable heart donor. But the devil doesn't do charity. He only makes deals. Even after all these years, I still remember that scene perfectly. My mother and I were standing by her bed as a pale Diana opened her eyes, struggling to manage a weak smile. "Frank, I'm so sorry. We promised forever, but I can't walk the rest of the way with you. I was trembling so hard I couldn't speak. I had tried to prepare myself, but I couldn't bring myself to say the lines Preston had given me. But Diana was running out of time. In the end, it was my mother who gritted her teeth and spoke first. I thought my son had finally caught a break with a rich girl, that he wouldn't have to struggle so much. But the Sullivans don't even care if you live or die, and now we have to spend our money on you. If I'd known, I would have fed our New Year's dumplings to a dog before wasting them on you. Luckily, my son is a good catch. He's met Vicky. She's a real heiress, someone who can give us a good life. You're just a burden, and frankly, you're dying at the perfect time. Haha. My mother's body shook with laughter, but tears were streaming down her face. She gripped my hand behind her back, so tightly I could feel the bones, her palm cold as ice. But even with her terrible acting, Diana was too weak to notice. She clutched her chest, gasping for air, in so much pain she could barely keep her eyes open. No, Frank's not like that. Mrs. Miller, you're just joking, right? Just then, as planned, Vicky, a girl I knew from the college drama club, walked into the room and intimately took my hand. Frank, my driver is here, Vicky said brightly. Let's not waste any more time. We need to go pick out our wedding dress and tux. I turned my head away, biting back tears. This was the only way to save Diana's life. I couldn't ruin it with my own selfishness. I gritted my teeth and forced the words out one by one. Diana, I'm getting married. Let's break up. As the cruel words left my lips, Diana's last bit of strength gave out, and she passed out. From the shadows, Preston Vance gave a signal. A medical team that had been on standby immediately wheeled Diana's bed away, disappearing down the long hospital corridor. The day Diana was scheduled to fly out of the country, I got a text from her roommate, Katie. I wanted to rush to the airport just to see her one last time from a distance. Her flight was about to depart, and time was short, so I jumped into an unmarked town car waiting downstairs. In that car, I answered the last phone call of my life. It was Preston. His voice was cold and flat. Goodbye, loser. Maybe his soul's memory has its limits. My recollection stops there, and trying to remember more gives me a splitting headache. What happened next? How'd I die? It's a complete blank. I can't remember anything. In the present, back in Diana's room, Preston's touch on her robe shocked her out of her daze. She let out a small cry, which pulled me back to reality as well. She spun around and grabbed his sleeve. My heart has been fine for 7 years. I can handle it. Is Frank's mother at the door? I need to see her. I have to ask her something. A jolt of hope went through me. My mother knew the real reason we broke up. Her sudden moment of clarity today. Maybe it was so she could finally explain everything to Diana. I was desperate for them to meet. But Preston's patience had clearly run out. He violently shook off her hand. Diana, have you forgotten how that old hag treated you 7 years ago? Diana lowered her head, and I couldn't see her expression. I just want to know the truth, she whispered. Preston grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him, his voice laced with menace. You want the truth? Fine. The truth is that Frank was, and always has been, a vain, selfish piece of garbage. He wasn't interested when you were just a normal girl, but the second he found out you were a Sullivan, he was all over you. Then, when you were dying in a hospital bed, he immediately moved on to the next rich girl. He and his mother stood by your bed and humiliated you, desperate to get rid of the burden who had been kicked out of her family. It was me who put all that aside, sent you abroad, and took care of you until you were well. It was me who begged our parents to forgive you and restore our engagement. Diana, you promised me you would forget him completely. You need to honor that promise and stay away from anyone and anything connected to Frank. Diana fell silent. That ugly breakup was a thorn in her heart she could never remove. I fell silent too. I was already dead. Obsessing over the truth of that thorn was pointless. It couldn't change the tragic ending that was already set in stone. A maid knocked on the door, reminding them it was time to leave for a family dinner to discuss the wedding plans. Diana didn't mention my mother again. She obediently changed into an evening gown and left on Preston's arm. Their luxury car drove right past my mother, still kneeling at the gates of the estate. Diana, sitting in the back seat, didn't spare my mother a single glance. Perhaps, in her own way, she had finally let go of her hatred for us. After the car was gone, several men in black jumped out of a van, knocked my mother unconscious, and dragged her inside. My own spirit was too weak to bear it, and I faded into blackness. When I came to, my soul was in a strange, sealed room with no windows. The room was empty except for a single bed where my unconscious mother lay. My form was growing more transparent, as if a strong breeze could scatter me into nothing. I suddenly remembered something I once heard. A person isn't truly dead until the last person who remembers them forgets. My soul had lingered in this world because of the unresolved feelings in the hearts of my mother and Diana. Now, one of them was lost in a fog of madness, and the other had let go of her past to marry another man. My time here is probably up. How's the crazy woman in there? A voice said from outside the door. Still trying to get out? I couldn't leave my mother like this. Hearing voices outside, I gathered my strength and floated through the door. 2 nurses were chatting by the entrance. Get out? Are you kidding? Nobody checks out of this place. If she acts up, we got plenty of sedatives. Besides, I overheard Mr. Vance himself telling the director to take special care of her, to make sure she disappears soon. Wow, she crossed Mr. Vance? Yeah, she's a goner. Preston. It was always Preston. Diana had already agreed to marry him. So why was he still trying to eliminate my mother? I couldn't let him kill her. I had to do something. I was frantic, my mind racing. I thought about calling the police and desperately tried to grab one of the nurses' phones, but my hand passed right through it. The 2 nurses didn't notice a thing, casually scrolling through celebrity gossip on their screens. Speaking of Mr. Vance, did you see the big story on Twitter today? Diana Sullivan's fans are trying to dox her ex-boyfriend. They want to force him to show up at the wedding and kneel for forgiveness. Good for them. I'd love to see that jerk crying and begging on his knees. Well, look at this. Someone just posted a huge twist. That heiress he supposedly left her for was a total fake. Turns out she's just some influencer who scams guys into giving her money. Man, the celebrity world is wild. This story just keeps getting crazier. I bet there's more to come. Suddenly, a group of people appeared at the end of the hall, walking toward us with purpose. Several men who looked like bodyguards moved swiftly, knocking out the 2 nurses before they could even react. They pried open the locked door and lifted my mother from the bed. The woman leading them removed her sunglasses and mask, revealing the face I dreamed of day and night. It was Diana. Mrs. Miller, she said, her voice cold. I found your devoted son, Frank. Hearing my name, my mother struggled to consciousness. When she saw Diana's face, her weak voice was filled with a strange, joyful excitement. Diana, you're back just in time. I made dumplings. Come, sit, eat them while they're hot. Diana stared down at my mother, her eyes filled with ice and sarcasm. After a long moment, she let out a cold laugh. Do you remember what you said to me in my hospital bed? That you'd rather feed your dumplings to a dog than waste them on me? Now you're offering them to me again. I can't tell if you're actually insane or just putting on an act. Even after all these years, hearing those cruel words Preston forced my mother to say still felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The words hit my mother like a physical blow, and with a surge of adrenaline, she broke free from the bodyguards holding her. It was a lie. What I said was a lie. What Frank said was a lie. It was all lies. No, not lies. We were tricked. My mother cried, tearing at her hair and shaking her head as she collapsed onto the floor. Diana, please forgive us. We only wanted to save you. We were tricked. Diana's smile vanished, her face becoming a cold, emotionless mask. I used to think Frank was just a social climbing coward who betrayed me, but I thought at least he cared about his own mother. But now he's off living it up with some fake heiress while you're left to rot on the streets. In my eyes, he's less than human. The fact that I ever loved him makes me sick. My mother stopped clawing at her hair and looked up at Diana with empty eyes. Diana, what are you talking about? Frank, he died 7 years ago. A dead silence fell over the room. My heart leaped into my throat. After 7 years, the news of my death had finally reached Diana's ears. For all those years, I had wondered how she would feel when she found out. Would she feel a sense of vengeance or just relief? But Diana's reaction was muted. There wasn't a trace of sadness on her face. She just frowned for a second before a cold, sarcastic smile spread across her lips. Mrs. Miller, it seems you really have lost your mind. Frank isn't dead. He's back. He came back with your precious daughter-in-law. I never imagined it would come to this. The 3 women I had wronged most in my life reunited in a coffee shop 7 years after my death. Sitting across from Diana and my mother was Vicky Peterson, the girl from my drama club who had agreed to be my excuse and who had been vilified for it ever since. Vicky was thinner than I remembered, but she looked well. I figured she must have left the country soon after I died, avoiding all the fallout. The thought brought me a small measure of relief. The silence in the cafe stretched on until Vicky finally took off her sunglasses. Hello, Diana. We meet again. Miss Peterson, Diana replied coolly. I don't know you. Don't pretend we're friends. Diana's face was a blank mask, clearly disdainful of even being in the same room as Vicky. The only reason I'm here is because you contacted me. You said you brought Frank back and that you were handing him over to me for disposal. As Diana spoke, Vicky's hand, hidden beneath the table, clenched into a fist. Under her hand rested a square, blue box. I understood instantly. What Vicky had brought for Diana to dispose of was that box. It was my urn, and with that, the last piece of my lost memory fell into place. I remember now. I had burdened Vicky with my ashes for all these years. My death had been so sudden. My body was in the city morgue, and my soul just floated there, watching as the staff tried to call my mother to come identify me. But the moment my mother saw my body, the shock shattered her mind. It took several orderlies to restrain her and take her to the hospital. My body couldn't stay in the morgue indefinitely. Someone had to claim it. The staff went through my phone's contact list and picked a name at random, Vicky Peterson. When she arrived at the morgue and saw me, she didn't say a word. She just quietly paid for the cremation. My body was sent into the furnace, and what came out was just a small pile of ash. Vicky placed those ashes in this blue box and took them with her when she left the country. We had been friends in the college drama club. When I asked for her help with the breakup charade, I had given her a vague explanation and begged her to keep it secret. Now I realized she was trying to return my ashes to the person she felt they belonged to. Before Vicky could even place the box on the table, a credit card slid across to her. "There's $1 million on that," Diana said. "My fans want to see Frank kneel at my wedding. They want him to publicly confess to the world how many women he's deceived and all the disgusting things he's done." "Frank, kneel at your wedding." Vicky laughed, as if it were the funniest joke she'd ever heard. She gave Diana a strange, pitying look. "You can't be serious. You really don't know, do you?" Vicky placed my urn on the table and opened the lid. "You really have no idea, do you? Frank died the day after he broke up with you 7 years ago." Diana's face twitched for a fraction of a second when she saw the ashes. But she quickly regained her composure, gave Vicky a cold glare, and pulled out a second card. Diana's voice was filled with disgust, but it trembled with an emotion she was desperately trying to contain. "I can't believe you two are still working together, trying to scam me for money. Your acting skills are even better than mine." But my mother, who had been silent until now, saw the ashes and knew. She recognized me instantly. Before the bodyguards could react, she lunged forward and clutched the box to her chest. "Frank, my son, you're back. My poor sweet boy," she wailed, tears streaming down her face as she stroked the cold urn as if it were my head. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have agreed to what that Preston man said. I shouldn't have forced Diana to leave you. But now she's back and you're back. Our little family is finally together again." Diana's expression grew thunderous. "Do you really think I'm as naive as I was back then?" she spat. "First, you fake his death. Then you spin some story about how the breakup was all for my own good. And then I'm supposed to forgive Frank and pay you for his ashes? Is that pathetic little scam the best you con artist could come up with?" She looked around the room wildly. "Frank, I know you're here somewhere. Stop hiding. If you want money, why don't you have the guts to face me yourself?" The cafe fell silent again. Vicky stared at Diana for a long moment, and then she burst out laughing. She laughed until she was doubled over, the sound growing louder and more hysterical until tears were streaming from her eyes. "You know, back in college, so many girls would have died to be with Frank. He was completely out of their league. How did he end up being so blind, choosing an idiot like you, and getting himself killed for it?" She wiped a tear from her eye. "And I'm an idiot too. He was safe with me, and I was the moron who thought bringing him back to you was a good idea." Diana's face grew darker with every laugh. Vicky finally wiped her eyes, reached into her bag, and tossed something onto the table in front of Diana. It was a cell phone. Its screen shattered into a spiderweb of cracks. "The day he died, Frank was rushing to the airport to see you one last time. There was a car accident. The car went off a cliff. The police ruled it a DUI on the driver's part and closed the case immediately. I saw the autopsy report, Diana. Multiple fractures. His ribs had punctured his lungs. He suffocated. He was broken and bleeding, lying at the bottom of a ravine where no one could hear him scream, slowly suffocating to death. Can you even begin to imagine how desperate he must have been?" Vicky's voice cracked. "No, you can't, because you never stopped to think. You never wondered why you suddenly got sick, or why the man you loved suddenly changed into a completely different person overnight." The words "completely different person" made Diana's hand tremble. The phone screen lit up, revealing the lock screen wallpaper. It was a selfie of us from the day we got together, kissing sweetly while she held that cake. Diana's expression turned strange as she looked at the unlocked screen. Her fingers moved automatically, typing in her own birthday. The password was correct. The phone unlocked, opening to the call log from 7 years ago. There at the top were the last 2 calls of my life. One from her roommate, Katie, and one for Preston Vance. Vicky's words filled in the final blank in my memory. Maybe being a ghost for so long makes you numb. Even as the memory returned, I felt strangely detached, as if I were watching the end of someone else's story. Perhaps my mind had simply erased the pain of that moment as a form of self-preservation. Diana, however, was deeply shaken. She stared at the two names in the call log, her mind reeling. That day was Katie's birthday, she muttered. She gave me a piece of cake, and then suddenly I couldn't breathe. I collapsed. But that's not right. Just a week before that, she came back with a new Chanel bag. She said her boyfriend took her out for her birthday. How could she have 2 birthdays in 1 week? Agitated, Diana pulled out her own phone, frantically scrolling through her contacts until she found Katie's old number. She tried to call, but was met with a cold, automated voice. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Her eyes flickered. Without hesitation, her fingers moved from her call log to iMessage, and then to my Facebook profile. I had always assumed she deleted or blocked me years ago. But as she scrolled, I saw a feed that was completely alien to me. Luxury cars, expensive watches, private jets, yachts, 5-star hotels. And every post featured a different beautiful woman, sometimes more than one. Diana had always known I wasn't the type to post my life all over social media. Before we broke up, my profile was always private, showing nothing. But after, my profile style changed completely. There were constant 9-photo grid posts, all showing off a life of extravagant, hedonistic partying. Diana scrolled through hundreds of these posts, and not a single one showed my face. She scrolled all the way back to the day we broke up to a post I had made about trying on a wedding suit. There was one photo of a hand adjusting a tie. She seemed to have finally found something. She tapped the photo, zooming in again and again, her eyes fixed on the index finger. The man in the photos had a build almost identical to mine. But on that index finger, a tiny mole that I had was missing. The person posting wasn't me. Someone had been impersonating me for 7 years. It was obvious why. Every post was a calculated reminder of my cruelty, another piece of proof that she had been a fool to ever love a vain, social climbing monster. The irony was that if she had ever felt even a flicker of doubt, if she had ever just zoomed in on one of those photos, the truth was right there, waiting to be found. Diana's hands began to shake violently, and her breathing grew ragged. She finally believed it. I was dead. I had been dead for 7 years. Vicky's voice was choked with emotion, speaking up for the person I could no longer be. I hired a professional climber to go down that cliff. It took them a full day and night to find this phone. I always knew Frank's death wasn't an accident. That's why I claimed his body and fled the country to protect myself. I stayed away until I saw the news about your wedding to Preston. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Diana, Frank died for you. And now you're about to marry the man who killed him. Vicky's words struck Diana like a bolt of lightning. Her entire world seemed to collapse in that single moment. All the pieces she couldn't fit together for the past 7 years suddenly clicked into place, weaving together the terrible, buried truth. But I was already dead. The body that had once held her was now nothing but a cold pile of ash. What good was a truth that came 7 years too late? I should have seen this coming. I should have known this would be the end. Back then, I had agreed to Preston's demands, to play the part of a heartless monster to save Diana's life. But deep down, I never gave up hope for us. I prayed that once she was healthy again, she would start to question what had happened, to see through the lies. I dreamed that I would explain everything, that she would understand why I had to let her go, and that she would come back to me. After all, she had loved me so fiercely. We had been so happy. But of course Preston would have thought of that. That devil wouldn't leave any loose ends. It was his meticulously crafted game, and he would never allow me a chance to ruin it. Only a dead man could never come back to challenge him for Diana. I should have known. The shock in Diana's eyes faded, replaced by a despair so deep it was bottomless. I closed my eyes, feeling my own connection to this world begin to fade, and I drifted away. When I awoke again, I was at a wedding. The venue was a castle, opulent and dreamlike, the kind of wedding every girl dreams of. My soul, weak and faint, hovered in the air, watching the guests mingle below, their faces bright with celebration. Near the stage, a few select reporters had their cameras and live-streaming equipment aimed at the couple on the altar, Diana and Preston. Surrounded by a sea of flowers, they gazed into each other's eyes, the perfect fairy tale prince and princess finally getting their happy ending. My memories were becoming hazy. I couldn't be sure if that scene in the coffee shop of Diana discovering the truth had actually happened. Maybe it was all just a final, desperate fantasy. This, right here, was the real ending for Diana and Preston. The officiant smiled at Preston. Do you, Preston, take Diana to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part? I do, Preston said. I whispered the words myself, but no one could hear me. Only Preston's confident voice echoed through the grand hall. All the guests from the Sullivan and Vance family smiled and nodded, witnessing the union of this perfect couple. The officiant then turned to Diana. Do you, Diana, take? Edo. Diana cut him off, her voice eager. The bride's charming impatience brought a ripple of light-hearted laughter from the crowd, adding to the sweet atmosphere. Many in the audience chuckled behind their hands. And on the live stream, fans were going wild, flooding the screen with virtual gifts and fireworks. Preston smiled, pleased, and took out the ring, preparing to slide it onto Diana's finger. But in that instant, the softness in Diana's eyes vanished, replaced by a look of pure venom. Before anyone could react, she pulled a scalpel from behind her back and, with a single, clean motion, slit Preston's throat. The movement was precise, unhesitating, as if she had practiced it 1,000 times. Blood gushed from the wound, blooming like crimson roses across the white silk of her wedding dress. Preston's face contorted in agony. He clutched at his throat, staring in disbelief at the woman who, just a moment ago, had been his loving bride. He quickly collapsed to the floor, veins bulging on his neck, his eyes wide with terror. He gasped, trying to draw a breath that would not come. Diana stood over him, looking down at his writhing form. The despair Frank felt before he died, she said, her voice a low whisper. Are you feeling it now? The audience finally processed what had happened, and screams of terror erupted through the hall. Diana stood on the stage, her face splattered with blood, her body shaking with laughter. She looked like a beautiful, poisonous flower blooming in the chaos. How was my performance? Did you really believe you had finally won my heart? She laughed. But Preston, for that 1 minute you were in heaven, I was planning the most painful way to drag you down to hell. At that moment, all the lights in the hall went out. The large screen behind the altar lit up, displaying a slideshow of shocking photos and documents. Every dirty secret, every crime committed by Preston and the entire Vance family was laid bare for the entire world to see on the live stream. It made a sick kind of sense. The soil that grows one evil weed is fertile enough for many. The screen showed records of patients admitted to asylums who later vanished without a trace. It showed doctors who took bribes to falsify medical reports. It showed police officers who consistently looked the other way. These were the open secrets that bound the Vance and Sullivan families together, and Diana had followed every thread, uncovering a mountain of evidence. Outside the castle, the wail of ambulance and police sirens grew louder. In the midst of the chaos, Diana turned the scalpel on herself, aiming it at her own heart. Frank, I've avenged you, she whispered. When we meet again in the afterlife, can you forgive me? Tears I couldn't shed streamed down my face. I reached out, desperate to stop the girl I loved from destroying herself. I wanted to scream that I had never hated her, that I would love her always, forever. But a powerless soul can't stop a blade. The next second, it plunged in her chest. Diana crumpled to the ground. As my spirit touched hers, I felt myself begin to dissolve. In her final moment, her eyes seemed to find me. With the last of her strength, she reached a hand toward me. Frank! The last of my soul scattered into nothing. Her hand fell to the floor empty. The story of Diana and me was destined to end in tragedy for everyone. The curtain had fallen. A blinding light stabbed at my eyes, and I instinctively threw an arm up to block it. Then, a gentle voice I had longed to hear for an eternity whispered in my ear. I don't know what I did wrong to make you avoid me, but I really, really like you. Stunned, I lowered my arm. Before me was a familiar, blushing face. Diana was wearing a white sweater dress, holding that same cake in one hand and a small bouquet of roses in the other. Standing there in the snow, she looked like an angel. Frank, I want to ask you one last time. Can I be your girlfriend? I would never forget this moment. I couldn't contain my joy. I pulled her into my arms and held her tight. The warmth of her body, the scent of her hair, it was all real. This wasn't a dream. I had been reborn. Heaven had given me a second chance with this girl. This time, I would never let her go. On a normal work day, I was packing up to head home when a coworker crowded my desk, phone in hand. Frank, you gotta see this, he said, pointing to a headline on Twitter. The entire Vance family, 23 of them, were arrested today. They're being charged with murder, money laundering, racketeering, bribery, the works. Says here, an anonymous source provided a mountain of evidence. The case is airtight. The Vances are going down for sure. I just smiled and said nothing. My coworker was too excited to notice it was time to leave. That arrogant heir, Preston Vance. They say he's the worst of them all. He's facing the death penalty. He shook his head. Wow. So the mighty have fallen. An entire dynasty, gone just like that. On my way home, I passed by the spicy noodle shop that Diana loved. Feeling happy, I ordered extra of all her favorites, the beef and shrimp dumplings she always wanted but felt were too expensive. As the owner handed me the takeout box, I could already picture her wrinkling her nose in delight. I couldn't help but walk a little faster. Years later, Diana and I had a beautiful family. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They say daughters usually look like their fathers, but our little girl was a perfect, miniature version of Diana. It wasn't just her looks. She had all of her mother's little mannerisms, from the way she'd tug on my sleeve to how she'd wrinkle her nose or pout her lips. I suddenly remembered my past life and the image of that brilliant, hardened, mature Diana. But in this life, she never became that person. With me, she was still the same girl from all those years ago, sweet and innocent, always looking at me with stars in her eyes. Oh, I forgot. Now, in our home, there are 2 pairs of starry eyes looking at me.